Hey guys, Mr. Edwards here, Centreville High School Automotive Technology. Today we're going to be doing a video on brake inspection on a vehicle. The next thing that you guys would have gotten into, if you remember back a month ago, we were starting on brakes. The next thing we would have done was brake inspections. That's checking the brakes on a vehicle, seeing what kind of shape they're in to see if we needed to do any kind of brake work to the vehicle. First thing we're going to cover is a couple tools you guys will need to be able to do this, and then we've got a couple cars that we're going to do this on here in my shop. First thing that you guys will need to be able to do is get the wheels off the car. Obviously the car needs to be off the ground, supported properly. To get the wheels off, if you guys have an impact gun that you can use, that's great. If you don't, obviously you can use hand tools, just a little bit more work. The main thing that you guys are going to need on disc brakes is a brake pad measurement gauge. This right here measures brake pads of all different thicknesses to tell us what kind of shape our brake pads are in. And you guys will need a micrometer or a digital caliper like this one right here to be able to measure the brake rotor to see what kind of shape it's in. The next kind of just generic tool you guys will need most likely is a flashlight, because you guys need to be able to see what kind of shape everything looks like it's in up inside the wheel wells of the vehicle.
So I've got a car here that's a 1996 Toyota Camry, and we're going to be inspecting the brakes on it. But before we go pulling the wheels off, there's a couple other things I want to check. First thing I want to check is the brake fluid. I want to check the level and condition of it. So to do that, I need to raise the hood up on the car and check the fluid condition. So with the hood up, we're going to find the brake fluid reservoir. Remember, it's almost always going to be right in front of the steering wheel because it's connected to the brake master cylinder, which is connected to the brake pedal right under the steering wheel. Find our brake fluid reservoir, and if you guys look on it, there's two lines, a minimum and maximum, and our brake fluid level is right up below the maximum line, so that's good. I mean, that's right up where it should be. It's not overfilled and it's not at the minimum. The fluid condition, on the other hand, doesn't look that great. If you guys remember, brake fluid should be a light golden to almost clear color. This fluid's kind of like a dark brown. It's definitely been in there a while, so that's something we definitely want to note as something that might need to be serviced on this vehicle. But it does have fluid, and the fluid level is full. I'm working on this vehicle in my garage at home. I don't have a lift here like we do at school, so you got to kind of overcome and adapt. I got a floor jack and jack stands. I've got the vehicle off the ground and supported, nice and sturdy. We're going to be able to do the work we need to do to check out the brakes on this thing. But one thing you guys need to keep in mind from earlier this year when we were doing floor jacks and jack stands, you need to have the vehicle supported on a flat, level, sturdy surface like my garage floor here. Not out here on a gravel surface like my driveway or grass. Anything that's uneven, soft, not level is not a good surface to be able to jack the vehicle up with a floor jack and support it with jack stands. You need a nice, sturdy, flat surface. Now, one other thing that I want to check before I go pulling the wheels off is if my emergency brake works. Every vehicle has two braking systems on it. It's got your service brakes, which is when you step on the brake pedal going down the road, your car slows down. That's the brakes that go to all four wheels, whether it be disc brakes or drum brakes, depends on the car. However, they also will have a parking brake or an emergency brake, as some people call it, which only goes to the rear wheels. What that's for is if your service brakes fail and you're going down the road at 60 miles an hour, you can pull a handle or step on a pedal, depending on the car, and it'll enable you to be able to stop the vehicle in an emergency. Also, a lot of people use it when they put the vehicle in park, or if it's a manual transmission vehicle, when they park it and put it in neutral to hold the vehicle still. If you have a manual transmission vehicle, you have to use it because it's what prevents the vehicle from rolling down the street when it's sitting. If you have an automatic transmission, you don't have to, but a lot of people do for good measure. So to check to see if the emergency or parking brake system is working, I'm here at my back wheels. I'm going to go inside the car. This car has an emergency brake pedal, and I'm going to push it down 3 clicks, and you'll be able to hear it click. And on the 3rd click, I should be able to come back here, and this wheel does not spin at all. With 3 clicks of the pedal down, I should not be able to move this. And if you look, it's locked up. Let's go over to the other side, make sure it's locked up also. And on the other side, it's not going anywhere. Our parking brake or emergency brake works. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pull all four wheels of the vehicle, all four wheels off the vehicle now. That way we'll be able to get a better look at our brakes and see if we need to do any repairs to the brakes on the vehicle. Alright, so I'm down here at wheel level with you guys now. This vehicle has four-wheel disc brakes, which means that it's got a disc brake system like this in all four corners of the vehicle. It does not have drum brakes. So, with our disc brakes, we're going to measure the brake pad thickness as well as the brake rotor thickness, and then check the condition of everything to do with the brake system, our caliper, our bracket, our brake hoses, our rotors, and of course our pads. Looking at this just visually, you guys should be able to identify all these components. We of course have our brake caliper, which is right here, which is what has the piston inside of it that comes out, squeezes our inner and outer brake pads onto the brake rotor. The rotor, the disc, is what's spinning at wheel speed going down the road. The pads are squeezed onto it by the caliper, slows the rotor down, stops the car. Our brake pads, remember, they're what wear away the most because they're what are designed to wear down to stop the car. The brake pads are going to be your number one wear component on your braking system. We're going to use our brake pad depth gauge or brake pad measurement gauge here to measure our brake pad thickness. So it can be kind of hard to see because our bracket for our brake pads that the caliper's bolted up to kind of gets in the way, but our outer brake pad is right down inside of there, and our inner brake pad is on the inside, and most calipers have a little viewing window that's in the front of them that you guys can look through or stick your pad measurement tool through to be able to measure that inside pad. Make sure that you're measuring the pad material, not the backing plate part of the pad. Remember, you're going to have a metal backing plate piece that the pad material is glued or riveted to. We don't want to measure our backing plate. We want to measure the pad material itself. And just visually, I can tell you guys there's not much left on here. If I can get the camera to focus a little bit, it is pretty worn out inside of there. But let's get our measurement gauge in here, be able to figure out how much brake pad we have left. So just by visually looking at it and being able to see how thin it is, I'm going to start with the thinnest measurement that we have. And that doesn't even fit up inside of there, which means that this outer brake pad at least is less than, let's see if I can get that to focus on here, less than 2 millimeters. This brake pad will not pass Virginia State safety inspection. These brakes need to be replaced. Let's check our inside pad. Look through that little window there, and you guys should be able to again identify the pad. If I can point it out here, the pad material. Here's your rotor, this rusty looking piece. The pad material, and then the backing plate. So if I get up inside of here with my measurement tool, this brake pad, I mean, that right there is your pad material, and there is less than 2 millimeters on that inside pad as well. There's your backing plate, there's your pad material, there's your rotor, that rusty looking area. There's not much left. So our front brakes on this car, at least on this driver's side, are toast. Alright, so now that I got a measurement on my brake pads here on the left front, I want to go ahead and measure my brake rotor. The reason we need to do this is because just like the pads wear, the brake rotor itself actually wears too. It also rusts, and rust is the degradation of metal. Chunks of it fall off over time, it gets thinner. Brake rotors have a minimum thickness specification, which we're going to look up here in a minute once we get a measurement on this one to see if this brake rotor is still serviceable. We obviously need to replace our brake pads on this car, and we need to be able to see if we can save this rotor by putting it on a brake lathe and resurfacing it, or if we need to go ahead and replace these brake rotors as well when we're replacing those pads. The way that we're going to measure the brake rotor, like I was saying, is with a digital caliper or micrometer. This is the quickest and easiest way to measure brake rotors. We're going to be measuring them in millimeters. This digital caliper right here I already had it turned on, but there's an on-off button right there. You press it, okay? And now, when it's all the way closed, it should be at 0. If this number was below or above 0 with it all the way closed like this, I can hit that yellow button, 0, and it'll automatically put it to 0 because we want to start at 0. We don't want anything besides 0 when it's all the way closed. We could measure in inches if we wanted to. The way you change between millimeters and inches is by pressing the blue button up top here. What I'm going to do is come over here to the rotor, and if you notice, there's this metal shield that's behind the rotor. This is not part of the rotor. This is the backing plate. It prevents rocks, dust, dirt, debris on the road from coming up here and getting stuck inside my brakes. I don't want to measure this. All I want to measure is the brake disc itself. So if you notice, this metal shield comes down here and kind of dips back. That way I can get my hands around the rotor and I can get my tool around the rotor here and get a measurement on the rotor itself. I want to measure the rotor right here in the middle of it because here on the outside, I got a little bit of a rust ridge and that doesn't count towards the thickness of the rotor. I don't want to measure rust. I want to measure actual braking surface on the rotor. So I want to measure right here in the middle of the rotor where the brake pads make contact with it. So to do that, I'm going to come in here, make sure I have a good contact right in the middle of the rotor, and take a look at what I got on my digital caliper. And I have 28.13 millimeters, and I'll try to hold that and bring it off here to show you guys. Hopefully it'll let me. A lot of these have a hold button on them that you can actually press and it'll save the measurement. Mine here at home does not. So it changed just slightly when I went to move it off, but it was 28.13 on the car. It's 28.17. We're going to take a look on all data and see what our minimum thickness specification is, because if the minimum thickness specification is above 28.17 or 28.13, we need to go ahead and replace this rotor. Okay, over here on the passenger front side now, again, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to take a measurement of our inner and outer brake pads, and we're going to take a measurement of our rotor thickness. Now, I can just again tell by eyeballing these that the brake pads are smoked. I mean, they are done. So I'm going to start with the smallest measurement again and get down in here. Remember, I'm trying to measure the brake pad material itself, which is the closest part of the brake pad to the rotor, not the metal backing plate that's behind it. And you guys can see there is barely any brake pad in here. This is the pad material right here. This is my backing plate. I'm not measuring that. I'm measuring the pad material that's down inside of here. And this just barely fits in there, so it is right at 2 millimeters. I mean, that's toast. So our outer brake pad on this side is toast. I'm going to come over here in the viewing window that you guys saw on the other side, take a measurement of my inside. And that's less than 2 millimeters. So we absolutely need front brake pads on this car. We'll talk more about it when we get into actually taking brakes apart, but you never replace brakes on just one wheel on a car. So if I need to replace the pads on my driver's front over there, I'm gonna be replacing them on this side regardless of what measurement I got over here. Pads come in a set of 4 pads, 2 for each side. I don't have to replace my back ones unless we measure them being bad too, but I have to replace both sets of brakes on the same axle. We never replace just one wheel. So now I'm going to take a measurement of my brake rotor on this side, and again we will go and check and see what our minimum thickness is for the front on all data in just a minute. Make sure I'm at 0 when I start. 28 point, can you guys see that? 28.64. So a little bit more on this rotor than on the one on the other side, but not by much. So we're gonna get our minimum thickness specification and then know if these rotors are still able to be resurfaced or we just need to replace them. If the rotor is below the minimum thickness specification, there's not enough metal left on here for us to be able to do anything with it. We just have to replace it. It is not safe to continue using. Okay, I'm in the back on the passenger side now, and I can just tell by eyeballing them the back brakes look considerably better. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a bigger pad measurement. be able to come in here through the little viewing window and see how thick my rear brake pads are on this car. Now this one, if you look, the bracket completely prevents me from being able to get my measurement tool even to the outside brake pad really. I can try and get down here like this, or they give me a little viewing window for the inside and the outside on the back of the caliper. So what I'm gonna do is move you guys so you can see a little bit better, hopefully. All right, so that one's right about the correct measurement, which is, if it'll focus, 6 millimeters. Now, when they made this tool, they said that 6 millimeters was yellow, which is getting worn out, but not immediately, you gotta replace it. I honestly consider 6 millimeter brake pads to still be green, good, perfectly good, because that's about half the life, or in some cases a little bit more for brake pads, especially rear brake pads, which already on most cars start out a little bit thinner than front brake pads from the factory. So 6 millimeters, there's plenty of life left on these rear brake pads, on the outside pad at least. Let's get a look at the inside pad. And that one again, right about 6 millimeters. So. Alright, so as you guys can see, it's kind of tricky to get down in here on this rotor with that backing plate, but if I squeeze down in here and look, I'm at 9.97 millimeters. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down. One thing I recommend you guys do when you're doing a full brake inspection like this and you're getting your measurements, write everything down. So keep a sheet. If we were in school, we'd have a sheet to record everything on, but if you're doing this on your own, take a piece of paper, write you know, the measurement you got on the left front rotor, the right front rotor, right rear rotor, and we're about to go do the left rear rotor, and your brake pad measurements as well. Last wheel here on the car is going to be the driver's rear, the left rear. Again, going to start by doing a measurement on my brake pads, and the rear calipers are kind of tricky to get the brake pad measurement tool in, so I'm going to go through my window here in the back. I'm going to guess that they're pretty close to what the measurement was on the other side, which was our 6 millimeters, but I'll get down in here. Again, measuring the pad material, not the backing plate. And yeah, I'm right at 6 millimeters on that outside pad. Let me get to the inside one. Again, right at 6 millimeters. So I don't have anything to worry about with these pads on this car. Let me go ahead and get my rotor measurement over here on this side. Kind of tricky to squeeze our digital caliper in there, but we'll make it work. And I'm at 9.80 millimeters. If I can squeeze it back out of there. Oh, it jumped. But 9.80 millimeters is the measurement that I got on the rotor. It helps if you have a digital caliper like this that has a button to hold the measurement so you can take it back off and see it, but this one doesn't. We got to use what we got. Okay guys, so I made a little bit of a list of all of our measurements that we just took. The left front, remember the rotor was 28.13 millimeters and our pads were less than 2 millimeters, red flag. Right front, the rotor was a little bit more at 28.64 millimeters. Pads again were toast, less than 2 millimeters. Right rear rotor was 9.97 millimeters, and our pads were plenty left on them, about 6 millimeters. Left rear, the rotor was 9.80 millimeters, and our pads were right at 6 millimeters. Now I'm here on AllData, the service information site that we use, library.alldatapro.com, remember. It is a paid subscription that Fairfax County Schools has, so you can't access it on anything that's not on the Fairfax County network. Remember when we're at school, you could use your phone on the school Wi-Fi. I don't know if you can use your school laptop, even if you're at home. I don't know the answer to that. If somebody wants to try and let me know, that'd be really awesome. Library.alldatapro.com. Don't put a www in front of it because it will be blocked. No idea why. Go to AllData. We're on the 1996 Toyota Camry. It's a 4-door. Remember, it's the V6. It'll ask you for all these specifications. I'm going to go ahead and pull my list out of the way there and hold on to it. Come down here to brakes and traction control. Scroll down to the disc brake system. under the disc brake system, what are we trying to find out? Well, we're trying to find the minimum thickness for our brake rotor. So we'll start in the front. Mechanical specifications, front rotors. Minimum thickness 1.024 inches. Okay, it's really strange for them to give the specification in inches, but I'll go ahead and write that down. And this will be good practice for us to use our conversion calculator up there. That's our minimum thickness for both front rotors. We'll come up here to the conversion calculator. We're trying to convert length or width. So yeah, it's still a distance. Under inches, we'll put 1.024 and see what that comes up as in millimeters. All right, it comes up as 26.01 millimeters. So both of our front rotors measured well over 28 millimeters. Our minimum is 26.01 millimeters. So we are well over specification. We can certainly put these rotors on a brake lathe, resurface them when we put some new pads on this car. Let's look at our back rotors just for comparison. Now, rear rotors on most cars are from the factory significantly thinner, and a lot of times they don't have the fins in them for air cooling like front rotors do. So if you guys saw, our rear rotor measurements that we took were quite a bit less, and that's because the rotors, when they were brand new, were much, much thinner. Let's see what our specification is though. So we're going to go back to brake rotor, back to specifications. We'll change to rear rotors. Minimum thickness 0.354 inches. So you can see the difference there. Write that down for myself and come up here to the conversion calculator again. Length 0.354, and that's 8.992 millimeters. Both of our rotor measurements were considerably more than that, well over 9 millimeters, almost 10 millimeters actually. So the rear rotors still have plenty of metal left on them as well. Our rotors on this car are in good shape. So this next car that I'm working on is a 1997 Chrysler Sebring. And this car has front disc brakes, just like the Camry that we were just working on, but it has rear drum brakes. So a little bit of a different brake setup. We're going to take a look at how to inspect those now. First thing I got to do is get the vehicle raised and supported, which it already is, and get that wheel off. I do want to check one thing, just like we did on the Camry though with this one, and make sure that my parking brake's working before I even bother to take the wheel off. So right now, I can take the wheel and spin it free. Everything's good, nothing's binding up. If I get inside the car here and pull up on the emergency brake handle, remember the Camry had an emergency brake pedal, this one has a handle. So if I hop inside the car here and pull up on that handle, it should prevent the back wheels from spinning. Locked up, not going anywhere. So my emergency brake does work. One critical thing when it comes to drum brakes, if you got to pull the brake drum off to be able to inspect them, and if you leave that parking brake on, you will never get that brake drum off, and if you force it off, you will destroy everything inside the drum, the shoes, the springs, the retainers, everything. So make sure you release the parking brake before you go trying to pull the brake drum off of any car. So with my lug nuts off, I can come down here, pull my rear wheel off. To get my brake drum off, again, it should be spinning free. If you can't get it to move, this brake drum's not going to come off because something's too tight. So spins free to get the brake drum off. If you're lucky, you should just be able to wiggle on it and pop it loose. If you're not, you might have to give it a little bit of encouragement. I cannot stress this enough though. If you're going to be hitting on the brake drum at all to get it off, or a brake rotor, if you're trying to get a brake rotor off, be really careful of the wheel studs here, because if you hit one of those, you will destroy it, and you're either going to have to replace it or rethread it. Be really careful, otherwise you will never get your lug nuts back on. Just give it a few love taps, break it loose, hit it, and maybe on the other side. and with a little bit of encouragement, it'll come off. Brake drums can be tricky though, guys. You just got to kind of work with it. So here's the inside of my brake drum, and you just want to make sure that there's no buildup of, rust or anything major on there. With my drum brake assembly, let's show you everything that we're looking at here. So we have our leading shoe, our front brake shoe. Remember, we have the shoe backing plate itself, the metal part, and then we have the actual braking material that on this one is held on by, the sun's kind of in your all's face. Let me come back here. There we go. It's held on by rivets. You can see those divots in it right there. So it's not glued on, it's actually riveted onto the metal backing plate. On the drum brake assembly itself, here's the wheel hub right here that spins with the wheel. There's springs inside of there that pull the shoes back in, and then the wheel cylinder up top that pushes out on the brake shoes. Now, we're gonna measure our braking material with a brake thickness measurement gauge, just like we do with the brake pads on the other car. We're going to take a look at all of our hardware and everything, make sure it's all in good shape, make sure we don't have any problems with this car. And I think we do just by looking at some stuff here. So we're going to find out what that is in just a minute. So looking at our brake shoe here, what you guys want to do is find one of the thickness measurement gauges that fits just on the shoe part itself, not on the backing plate and the shoe, and is about the same thickness, like this one right here. If it's thicker than the brake shoe part itself, like this one, see how that's like double the size, or thinner, like this one here, see, that's not the correct measurement. But when you find the one that's pretty much the same size as the braking material itself, like that right there, that's the measurement that we have. And we're at about 5 millimeters. So, here's one thing to keep in mind. When you're using one of these gauges, usually the green means it's good, no problem. The yellow is it's getting there, it's getting worn out, and then the red is you're in bad shape, replace it. Kind of like a stoplight, green, yellow, red. However, these are mainly designed for use on disc brake systems because that's what we see a lot of these days and service most often. So, on a drum brake system, having brake shoes that are at 5 millimeters is actually really good. Let's measure the back one back here, make sure they're about the same, which they should be. I expect they are. Brand new brake shoes are usually 5 to 6 millimeters. I mean, these ones are barely worn. Yeah, this one's right about the same. You can see, get the camera to focus. This one's right about the same. So, in terms of the thickness of our braking material, these are actually in great shape. Even though technically it's a yellow color, it's 5 millimeters. That's almost a brand new brake shoe. When they get down to 2 millimeters, then obviously they fail Virginia State inspection, and you need to be thinking about replacing them. Again, just like with disc brakes, anytime that you replace the brake shoes, you need to do something with the brake drums because you don't want to have warped, rusted brake drums on nice brand new brake shoes. However, there is a problem with this system right here. The next thing that you guys need to check once you've checked your brake shoe thickness is your wheel cylinder. It's pretty easy to do. It has these rubber boots on it, and if you come up inside of here and take your finger and pull back on these rubber boots, this should be dry. You should not be able to see any grease, any fluid, anything like that. And if I pull back on this, watch what happens. Fluid just comes dripping out of here. That's brake fluid. All right, see how it's all over that? That's why this looks all greasy. That's why the inside of the brake drum is all greasy. There is brake fluid leaking out of my wheel cylinder right here. Not good. These wheel cylinders need to be replaced, and because the brake shoes and the brake drum are contaminated with brake fluid, we need to replace our brake shoes and our brake drum as well. So big problem here, and that's why we do brake inspections, to try to find stuff like this. I'm working on my own car. This is my Chrysler Sebring convertible here. I honestly, until I made this video, had no idea that I had this problem. I inspected the brakes on this thing when I did the safety inspection on it several months ago, and they were fine then. So stuff happens, even to your own cars, guys, and you need to know this stuff. Otherwise, I would have had no idea that I had this problem, and I have brake fluid leaking all inside my rear brake drum. In terms of everything else, though, it looks pretty good back here. I don't have any broken springs or anything like that. So that's how to inspect the drum brakes on a drum brake system if you have front disc brake, rear drum brake. There is a micrometer, or a digital caliper rather, to measure the thickness of the brake drum if you wanted to resurface it instead of replace it. However, I don't have one of those here at my house, so I'm not able to show you guys how to use that. When we're back at school and you guys are doing brake inspections and you are inspecting the brakes on a drum brake vehicle, you'll absolutely use that. It's very similar to the one that I use to measure the rotors, just about 4 times the size, because it's got to be able to measure all the way across this brake drum here. Now you guys would put everything back together. Make sure you put all 4 wheels back on the car, lower it down, torque them by hand. That's the easiest way to damage brakes, is to not properly torque your wheels. So put everything back together, torque all the wheels by hand, and you'd be all good to go.
So when you guys are done here, make sure we obviously put all of our tools that we used away. Any tools like our pad measurement gauge and our digital caliper need to go back where they belonged. These digital calipers live in a little case like this usually that has nice foam inside of it. It protects them from getting damaged because they're very, very sensitive. So make sure it goes back in its nice little case where it belongs. The other thing that's critical about these guys is make sure that we turn it off. So right here, that red button to turn it on and off, make sure you press that, because these things have a little tiny watch battery inside of them. There's an extra one right there that if you don't turn it off, it'll just stay on for days and days and days and kill the batteries. And these batteries are not cheap. So please make sure you turn off the digital caliper before you put it away in its case.
Would you get out from under there? You don't know how to fix these brakes. Don't lick oil. Shop dog.
Alright guys, so today we did a brake inspection on this car and on a little bit of a taste of drum brakes on my Chrysler Sebring. We found some stuff out. We found some stuff that we need to repair. On this car, we need to replace those front pads and either resurface or replace the rotors in the front. They certainly have plenty of metal left on them to be able to resurface them, but you got to be able to use a brake lathe for that. That's going to be coming up soon. The other thing that we found out that was pretty significant that I had honestly no clue about was on the rear drum brakes on my Chrysler Sebring, we had leaking wheel cylinders that need to get taken care of because they're leaking brake fluid out all over inside, everything inside my brake drums. Not good. That's why we do this stuff, guys. That's what I said earlier. That's why this is so important, because on your own car, sometimes there's stuff that you have no clues going on and can pose a major safety risk. Take this time to learn this stuff. It'll help you out in the long run and save you guys a ton of money potentially. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure you fill out the sheet that goes along with it. I miss being in school with you guys, but we're dealing with what we got right now, trying to make the best of it. I appreciate you guys watching this video, and we'll talk soon.